You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
Alrighty, what's up, Coaches Nation? Another week. I feel like this week has gone by super fast. I don't know about you, Faisal, but like it has just flown by. But we are excited and happy to be here again with you guys. Today, normally I say today our special guest is fill in the blank, but today
we are the special guest.
We are the special guests. So we are going to have a really, really cool conversation today. It is going to be around creating your offer as a coach. How do you get in front of the right people? Who are the right people? How do you decide what to put in your offer? How are you going to serve people? What are the format, the structure, all of that sort of stuff. Because this is a critical piece to being able to serve people. You got to know what it is that you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who you're going to do it to. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our experience. We're also going to talk about things that we know within the industry and what we're seeing in our fellow coaches and kind of their experiences. So we're so excited to jump into this conversation. But first, what are some wins you've had this week, Faisal?
For me, the biggest win is that I feel the pains of growth. That is, and then aside from it, there is. I've experienced it multiple times, and personally, I've gone through this period. And a lot of times, when we think of growth and positive, this and that and the other, the actual process of it is actually not very positive. It's painful, and then on the other side, you start to see a different aspect of you come out. So I'm actually very happy about that I'm growing, and I know there's a good reason for that.
Yeah. All right, Faisal, we will commend you on the suffering for the cause of growth.
I create a distinction between pain and suffering. Suffering is only if I'm making this choice consciously. Suffering is when you're like, oh, this has been dumped on me and I don't want to deal with this.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Suffering is pain, but there's a mindset around that. Yes. So for me, I would say, so I have this constant struggle and tension in my life between my love for business and what I do, and it's like I could spend all day every day working on stuff and serving people and figuring out how to do things. But then I kind of have this other role in my life called mother, and and my kids, who I have 4 of them between the ages of 10 and 14, they need my time and attention more than anybody, because who's going to teach them? Who's going to nurture them if it's not me? My husband maybe a little bit, but he's a husband, and so we won't go down that road. But like nobody can be their
damn
mother.
Husbands.
I know, but nobody can be their mother like I can. So, but other coaches, other entrepreneurs, investors, they can do the stuff that I do there. So I have to remind myself that my role as a mom really is the biggest thing in my life. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with somebody, and she asked me, she's like, so what are the biggest value, I can't remember how she put it, but what are some of the biggest value added projects or things that you do in your week? Like where do you provide the most value? And I sat and thought about it for a minute. And she was talking about my work, but really my first thing is like my biggest value add in this world is being a mom. And so anyway, all of that is a lead in to my win, is that I'm reading a book that I don't agree 100% with, but has some extremely, extremely valuable ideas in it. It is called, oh my gosh, I just totally forgot it.
By Dr. Shefali?
No, totally random. It has nothing to do with, well, I shouldn't say nothing to do with kids. Why did I just space on something with the devil? Why? Hold on. I was listening to it this morning. Outwitting the Devil. It's by Napoleon Hill. super fascinating. Again, I don't agree with 100% of what he says, but a lot of it has really gotten me thinking, and it's revived and energized my desire and my around the intentionality around my kids. And so, anyway, all of that to say is I've set aside specific time this week. I'm working on with the kids on developing specific goals in their life because I want to make sure that I am training them to be productive and goal oriented as adults. And anyway, so they're all choosing things that they want to get really good at. And it just so happens that it's all kind of entrepreneurial stuff, or most of it is. And so two of my girls, we created a bakery, little bakery business. It's called Tween Bakery. And they are making cupcakes and cakes and selling them. And we've got 5 orders already within the last 3 days. So they are so excited about it. So I'm teaching them about cost of goods sold and just kind of all of that sort of stuff. And it's fun, and they're excited about it. They want to get really good at the fancy decorating and stuff like that. So that's my win. That was a really long win, but that's my win, is just my own focus and energy in teaching my kids something that's important to me, that I want them to embody. And so it's fun.
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful win. I love that. And even when you shared that my other role, it's more like this is your other role. And one thing I just want to honor you, and I want to hand it to you, because with dads, the one thing I've learned is that when we're with our kids, we care and we do a lot, but when we go off, we completely switch off. I don't know if that's true for the mom.
No, it's not for me.
Yeah, I haven't noticed that with moms, and including my wife. I've talked to her, it's like there is no switching off. I'm like, that is hard, aside from the physical part of always being there. But even outside of that, if you cannot, that's like a 24/7 role. And just especially with 4 kids, I don't know how you do that part. I struggle with 2 kids. And so that I just want to honor you on that, because that's and it is a huge value add, because what are those kids going to do? They're going to go out in the world, and they either create a positive world or a world that's going to break down.
Absolutely. So as much as I think about, like, I want to change the world through my clients or whatever, really, I believe my focus most importantly needs to be, I'm going to change the world through my kids. And if I train them to think well, and all of those sort of things, and have compassion and all of the things that I feel like are important, then they will. And that'll be my greatest contribution to the world.
Agreed.
All right. So we're going to recognize our sponsor for this podcast, which is the Coaching Mastery Community. It is a virtual community full of amazing coaches internationally that are all dedicated to growing their business, growing themselves in their business as well. So it's both coaching mastery, but also business mastery, because best coach in the world isn't really going to have much of an impact unless they're able to get the world to see and recognize what it is they're doing. So that business mastery, being able to market, being able to get your abilities out there, is, I think, equally as important to actually coaching well. So we combine the two through a community of support and encouragement and accountability, that just every week there's multiple opportunities to grow in both of those ways. And it has been a labor of love and super fun. Both Faisal and I are in it, and we it has supported us and helped us move forward in our own businesses, and more than what we would even reasonably think we would have done without the community. So if you guys are coaches, well, I would think you would be coaches, otherwise you might not be watching this or listening to this. But if you are in the need for a community, a place that you can mastermind with like-minded coaches who have a lot to give, who want to get better, who want to grow their business and grow themselves, you will find yourself in the right place in our community. So go to coachingmasterycommunity.com and you can find all the information out about it and have a conversation with one of us to get some of the nitty gritty details on what it looks like and how you're going to grow because of it. Faisal, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, definitely, and it's like it would be an understatement to say that, and we'll talk about offers and value ladders and stuff. Until I got connected to Coaching Mastery Community, I literally did not have the confidence to go out there and do a lot of this stuff. But aside from confidence, it's just a shift in perspective. It's the shift in understanding strategies that others are trying, the problems that they're dealing with, especially because a lot of these coaches are at a very similar level as I was. And this was a very important breakthrough for me because most of the people that I followed were way ahead of me in terms of business. And I'm like, how are these people doing it? But then when you watch people who are around the same level as you, maybe 1 or 2, 3 years ahead of you and a few years behind you, or at same time that you started, it creates this safe space where you can actually grow your business and yourself very, very quickly. And I underestimated that immensely when I started. I'm like, oh, this is not going to do anything. I was like, I'll just try this because nothing else is working, and I've shared that before. So yeah, for me, it's been a godsend in a sense.
Awesome. All right, so we are going to shift now to the meat of the conversation today, and that is around value ladders. It's around creating an offer as a coach. I think on the surface, it seems simple. Like when I started, kind of shifted into coaching, I was shifting out of mental health as a psychologist into coaching, and my perspective was like, well, as a psychologist, I met with individuals mostly, sometimes married couples, sometimes kids or families, but it was primarily individual therapy. And so I'm like, well, that'll be what coaching is. And so I shifted over and I was like, and where are all the people? And so it has been an interesting journey for me of kind of figuring out what do I want to offer? Who am I going to serve? Who do I want to serve? Who's not, who am I not going to get burnt out by? Because that's kind of where I was in kind of my last role, is just realizing that some of the folks that I were serving, as much as they needed services, it was kind of sucking my energy. I was letting it suck my energy. It didn't, I needed to kind of shift and change and honor where I feel like I could serve people the best. So it's I say all that because I think it seems like a no-brainer, obvious. Well, I'm a coach. I'm going to coach people. But I think there's a lot more to that we can unpack and kind of help you think about some of the nuances of it to really get you to start thinking deeply about your own business, which is going to be the point of this conversation. It's not for us to say, hey, you should do this, or hey, you should do that, but really just to get you to start thinking about some other ideas and about things that maybe you hadn't thought of before, or things that you are good at or not good at, and how does that fit into your business. I am looking forward to this.
Faisal, I'm excited about this.
How did you come into coaching, and kind of what was your perspective of like what you were going to do as a coach and how that was going to work?
And it connects very well to what you said. And it was, even though I didn't come from like yours is probably much more confusing because you are already in that like mental health world in a sense, and now you're shifting like, who do I serve? But even for me, like I came from a very different background, from an engineering background and not an entrepreneurial background. It was a job that I was doing. And I want to talk a little bit about the identity shift around that. But more importantly, when I started out, I was like, I want to help everyone. That was literally my mindset. And naturally, the people and it actually didn't pick up on this until like a couple of years down the road, when my wife, she kept watching the videos. It's like, sounds like you're talking to your family. And she was so spot on, because I was having a conversation with them, and because I wanted to help. I wanted to serve, and maybe that was a part of the thing that I needed to have that conversation with myself, because I couldn't have them with them in person. So it was very odd. And the problem with that was that And when I go back and watch some of those videos, it's like an impossible thing to do a lot of times, because I'm trying to serve people who don't want to be served in that way. Yeah. And on top of that, I don't even know if I can serve them in that way. But my natural human tendencies is help the people around you. But as I started growing, as I started connecting with the right clients, by right clients, I mean people who I felt aligned with in terms of vision, in terms of what they were seeking in life and their growth patterns. And those are the people that I work with primarily now, who care about legacy, who care about their purpose, who care about building something that's bigger than them, who care about their balance in life in terms of their family, themselves, and how they're showing up. When I connected with them, it just started spark. Like this was like, I was like, holy shoot, what the hell have I been doing up until now? And when I now talk to when I'm on video or live, I'm picturing my clients. I'm picturing the ideal clients that I have, and just the words that come out, they come out from the heart. Just the language that I use, the connection that I feel with them is just beyond everything else. And so that had to shift. I had to understand what those clients were. But the interesting thing is, it's not like I went out there and picked a niche.
Yeah.
That came from all doing, like, experimenting with working with different people. And then at some point realizing, hey, these are the kind of people I want to work with. And it wasn't even in the sense that, oh, specifically this type of people. It became specific, but it was more the psychology around it, which was, for me, was very interesting. And what I mean by that is, right now, primarily, I'm working with real estate investors and coaches. Or influencers. They have very similar mindsets. Their mindset is around, again, their legacy, their purpose, something bigger than them. How do they create balance and time freedom and all that stuff that I care about. So it's been a very interesting journey. And if I were to go back, I would be like, to my younger self, and I always think about that, it'd be like, get out of your comfort zone, start venturing out and talking to people outside of your circle. That's not the place you want to do this.
One of the things too I noticed in myself in the journey is kind of this expectation that, well, I just need to find who, as you said, I'm going to need to find my niche or niche, whichever part of the country you're from or the world. I need to figure out what that is, and I need to just jump in and do it. But I've realized, for me at least, it's been a process of trying stuff and then kind of figuring out what I don't want to do, rather than jumping in and figuring out what I do want to do. I've used this analogy a lot with people because I think it's powerful. It's like creating a statue. You start with a statue with a big piece of stone of some sort, and you know that the statue is inside, but our job isn't to create or to build the statue. Actually, our job is to get rid of the stuff that doesn't belong, because then the statue can emerge. And I feel like that's the journey of finding who your people are, or who you want to serve, is it's kind of serving everybody, maybe or as many people as you can at the beginning, but it's slowly chiseling, like, yeah, that person, I don't know why, but I'm really frustrated with them. Then you do a little work and figure out why you're frustrated with them. Is it because of you? Is it because of them? Is it because of a mismatch? And then and you come to kind of some recognition, and then, all right, I chiseled that off. I definitely don't want to work with, a person with that kind of mindset, or, this, whatever. And so I think it's just a process of learning and deciding who is not going to be the best fit for you. So it's not, I don't think, I would find myself sometimes having like thoughts of that I wasn't like doing it right by not knowing. And I just kind of want to free people up a little bit. Like, if you don't know, great. That just means you don't know, and you're at the beginning of the journey for that. There's no shame in that, and it's just part of the discovery process. I don't know if you experienced, or if you've kind of seen people struggle with their mindset around who they're going to serve, and kind of figuring that out.
Yeah, and it has been very interesting because when I started out as a high performance coach, and what I underestimated was how much I needed to work on my own mindset to get to a point to serve people. And like it's natural to I don't know if it's natural to underestimate that, but it's like something that it's that analogy of fish in the water. Like I'm so deep into it that I'm thinking that, oh, I've grown enough to do this. That doesn't mean I can't serve people, but it means that there's this congruency and integrity that we need to understand around we're helping people with some of their deepest aspects of themselves, their mindset, their behavior, their challenges. We need to do 10 times more than that internally. And my mindset originally, I caught it later on, was like, oh, I'll get to that stuff when I get a bunch of clients. And it just simply doesn't work. It's not that kind of world. Even though I had done a lot of work in the past, but I'm talking about in my day-to-day life, how am I approaching this? I can't put off the things that I'm trying to challenge my clients with, because there's an internal incongruency that comes up. And one of the, we've talked about this, sorry, one of the most common things with coaches is they go out there and start selling coaching, but they don't have a coach. Like there's an incongruency there. Or you're in a session, you're about to challenge somebody when it comes to their well-being or their relationship or their business, and you haven't challenged yourself enough. And I've actually coached other coaches on this, is like, they're like, well, I want to take it easy. I'm like, well, what would you do if you come across a client who says the same thing, and they, you know, that they're telling you that they need to challenge themselves to grow there? Would I want to take it easy be a satisfactory answer for you? And then that's the thing, we can't expect to support people if we're not doing, especially as a coach, we're not doing 10 times the amount of work, probably more. I don't know. But the point there is that we really need to understand that it's less about the doing, it's more about how we're internally wiring ourselves, and then how we're showing up with that in terms of our behavior. And for me, a lot of that stuff, like I was trying to bypass that. And I see the same exact thing with a lot of newer coaches. They're trying to bypass the journey. The journey is not supposed to be easy. Like there's like, we have this, and I don't know if it's a norm, like a nowadays culture thing, or what it is that we want to bypass anything that's hard. We want to get to the point that we get, and I don't know if it's the quick pleasure that we get out of TikTok and all that stuff, but that's not how life works. Anything where there's mastery involved, anything where there's depth involved, anything where there's growth involved, it's gonna involve a level of hardship. Doesn't matter what kind of technology you have, doesn't matter what technology can support, it doesn't bypass things, at least as far as we know. And I want to give I have clients, and I've shared this with my clients who are trying to create time freedom, and I have clients who are like fully there, like they don't need anything, they're millionaires, they don't need anything other than the fact that they need to create a purposeful life. They will gladly write a check for millions of dollars to anybody who can help them with those problems. Nobody has answers for them, or technological solutions for them, or neurological solution for them to switch off the thinking around their relationships, around themselves, around so many things. They have to actually do the hard work to move forward.
Yes. Yeah. Wow, you just like stopped midstream.
I thought I was done.
You're like, ah! Okay. I couldn't agree more. There is a lot of research around the negative side of social media, and every time our phone dings or our watch goes off,
I
like,
know, yeah. I had to turn that on, like, why is this going off?
I know, it's like literally our brain is being operant conditioned to respond a certain way every time we hear something or feel the little buzz on our, and there's a little release of endorphins, and social media is being discovered to be as addicting as cocaine and some of these other things, because it is the amount of times in a day that we are being conditioned, and that conditioning is being reinforced, is is just astronomical. But the crux of it is discipline. And, kind of what you're saying, Faisal, is, throw $1 million at somebody that hasn't really worked for it. They're gonna be clueless on how to keep it and how to grow it. They're gonna lose it. They're gonna spend it. Because it's the same mindset. It's the same behaviors that didn't get them $1 million that they're gonna use with the $1 million. And so it's totally, I 100% agree. It's about the journey. It's about the growth. It's about the discipline. It's about all of that sort of stuff that happens with the hard work. And so, and in a coaching career, there's a lot of hard work that needs to happen. I remind myself this all the time. I'm in the middle of doing a challenge, or of trying to do a challenge, because this week was supposed to be the week I'm doing my challenge. My initial strategy was just to do organic lead generation for it. Completely bombed. Didn't get any interest. I just wanted to quit. Like, my natural instinct is to say, screw it. I'm not going to do a challenge. My ego can't take it. I'm just going to do something else. But I have, as we talked about collaborating, I have I have a friend who is an expert in social media stuff. And so he's been kind of coaching me and keeping me accountable to all this stuff. And so, he kind of brought my brain around to a different way of thinking, that it wasn't necessarily me that was failing. It was the fact that maybe I don't have the right friends on Facebook. And that was the problem, that it's just not reaching the right people. But that's an example of our mindset. We have to change our mindset through the process. And there's a lot of hard work in really getting successful, a lot of perseverance, through that whole process. There, I'll take a deep breath and
I love that. And the thing that you mentioned about the challenge, and it takes me back to those initial years when I would try something like that. And I love the fact that you have somebody that's supporting you on that. I didn't. So this is what it looked like. I would somehow muster up the courage to do a webinar, and I would prepare everything. And a couple of times I got lucky because there were some people that show up. And I still remember the first webinar that I did was on GoToWebinar that I did it on. This was like 5 years ago or something like that. And I had practiced a little bit with friends and family before, and most of the people that were on it were friends and family who were supporting me on it. But then so a GoToWebinar, if you know it, it's not like this. It's like more, it's not like Zoom conferencing. It's like you're there, your presentation's there are names there. You don't even know if they're hearing you, so you have to check in. And I was like doing 50 check-ins, like, are you guys hearing me? Because everybody's but it was like the most, it's like, what am I doing here? But then those moments where you go through this webinar and nobody shows up. And then I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do this. And what it looked like for me was it would take me about a month to recover out of that sense of, and then that how much growth you have to go through to deal with this. Now, I mean, it's happened this last year where I did something, a lot of people didn't show up. And I was like, okay. Took me a day to recover versus a month, which is a big difference.
Yes, it is.
And this is the thing that we need to understand. And these are the things, by the way, these are the things we're going to be challenging our clients with. Maybe not exactly in the same medium, but and I've talked about this within our community, that Rich Litvin talked about this. You can't take your clients deeper than you've gone yourself. He's not necessarily talking about from my perspective in terms of the medium of it. So you're going to run into somebody who will be very successful in their business. But guess what? They're going to have a problem in their personal life. And it doesn't matter which part of your life, if you haven't put that effort and challenged yourself to that degree and dealt with those fears, you're going to have a very, very hard time challenging this person. Or for them to even open up, or for you to subconsciously sabotage the coaching process, and because you don't feel congruent internally. Mm-hmm. Like this is like the things that we're doing. It's not about the things that we're doing. It's about how we're growing. It's about who we're becoming, which I want to transition into that identity piece before we even talk about, because I think these are the foundations. So I know you have more experience in the entrepreneurial world than I do. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the identity of an entrepreneur and why is that important in the coaching world and why that's important. What do you think about that, Dr. Sher?
I do think it's super important. And I became aware, or I became aware of kind of that entrepreneurial mindset in coaching realtors versus investors. So let me just talk about that real quick. When I pivot, so I mean, I've got a strong background in real estate. So as I was getting into coaching, I'm like, okay, I would love to integrate coaching into real estate because it's two passions of mine. How am I going to do that? So I coached some realtors, and I've also coached investors. And what I found, of course, this is a generalization, but what I found is most of the realtors that I would coach treated their realtor career as kind of a job. They didn't really take ownership of their what they did. They blamed their broker, their team lead, clients. They blamed everybody else for why their business wasn't growing, and they weren't doing what they had been told and taught to do with lead generation and follow up and all the different things. And those are all hallmarks to me of a mindset around an employee who expects they just need to be told what to do, but they're not taking ownership of their journey. Whereas the investors, in general, have this mindset of growth and that their investments and their ability to be successful is all up to them, and they got to figure it out. They got to do the hard work. And so I think there's a very big difference between people that take ownership, complete ownership of their life, and people that don't. Now, I realize there's plenty of people that have jobs that have more of an entrepreneurial mindset, but I just tended to notice that as a kind of a common theme between the two different. And so as a coach, for the coaches listening, my encouragement to you is, which camp are you falling on? Are you seeing your coaching journey as one of, are you blaming other people, clients? Are you blaming are you blaming your marketers? Are you blaming, other people for the lack of success? Or are you taking ownership and, continuing to problem solve and continuing to figure out what's working, what's not working? And because it's ultimately, it's you, it's your skill set, it's your desire, it's your impact that you're wanting to have. And even if you are a coach within another organization, how are you treating your coaching journey in that organization? So I think there's, that's kind of the two ends of the spectrum of mindset that I see, kind of around entrepreneurship. How does that kind of fit for you, Faisal?
Yes, and this is something, relatively new for me, and I didn't realize how much of an entrepreneurial mindset I had until I got into this world. But here was the problem. I had the mindset, but I didn't have the tools and the strategies and training within it. And more importantly, I had never adapted the identity of an entrepreneur. And this is very important. And I've learned to look at this in two ways. Nothing wrong with the job. Like we have to understand that you don't, and this is the part maybe in the coaching industry has to slowly start to change. So one of the big breakthroughs that I had, which were through entrepreneurial efforts, but I got to land a good contract, and I learned a lot within that contract. I didn't have to think a lot about the marketing and other stuff. So I practiced a lot of my sales, a lot of my coaching skills and all that stuff. And I got to see a lot of repetition. So I understood, I gained a lot of experience. But what I realized after 2 years of doing that, I'm like, had I not had that, which direction would I have gone, and what would that mean for me? And I went back to, I've shared this analogy. When I went to engineering school, when I came out, my first thought was not, let me start a business. even though I had an entrepreneurial mindset, my thought was, okay, let me get some experience. I needed to understand the thing. Now, the problem with the coaching world right now is that you get a certification or something, like there is no organizational system other than a few handful that are there where you can go and get some experience. You're basically, hey, you know what to do, go figure it out. It's not very simple, especially if you haven't had training in sales and marketing. You don't have a model around how entrepreneurship works. You haven't had a family member or friend or somebody who's run a business, and they're open to supporting you in some way. If you don't have that stuff, it's very complex. So I think a few decisions that need to be made. First of all, do you really want to be an entrepreneur? That's an internal decision that you have to make, because with that, like you said, there's this this one thing that I've learned among all the entrepreneurs. Most of my clients are entrepreneurs, or they want to be entrepreneurs. That I've seen is that one thing that they have to take on is that full responsibility. And generally speaking, within the coaching world, we ideally want people to take full responsibility. But with that responsibility, I love that I'm reading Limitless. Jim Quick, he talks about his encounter with Stan Lee, the creator of Marvel Universe, everything. And I loved how he talked about it. And there's the famous line in Spider-Man and all the movies, with great power comes great responsibility. But then he put it in the other way. He told Stan, he's like, well, maybe the other way around is true too. With great responsibility comes great power. And Stan Lee kind of agreed with him, and he's like, oh, that was a very memorable moment for me that he agreed with me. So I think it's an internal decision. And once you make that decision, you have to work on that identity piece. And that identity is probably, I think, one of the hardest things to create, because the problem with that is that you have to completely shift how you think about your life with that. You're no more. So with working with somebody, you're kind of laying your hands off of some things. I have nothing to do with the bigger system. Yep. I have nothing to do with how the culture works. I have nothing to do with how my superiors do things. I will do my part. I'll take responsibility for that, move it forward. Mm-hmm. But with entrepreneurship, that's not the case. You are actually taking responsibility for the whole, because there's nobody else, especially initially, there's nobody else to point fingers to but yourself. And your normal tendency, like you said, will be to point somewhere.
Yes.
Because that's how we've been trained to think in the job world, in the normal world. Now, that doesn't mean that people who work, they don't take full responsibility, but they don't take as much responsibility in the context of what they do. And once they start doing things, the complexity exponentially increases. Mm-hmm. So you add that to that. And so my question, something I want coaches to think about, do you actually want to be an entrepreneur, or do you want to be a coach, not necessarily on your own to do all this stuff, but you want to be a coach who wants to get better and better at their craft, but not necessarily deal with all the entrepreneurial stuff, because there are ways around that. I did that. Yep. And that is people who have developed those organizations, you reach out to them. And that might be a huge distinction in terms of your approach in business. And maybe at some point you will get to the point where you want to be an entrepreneur, or maybe not. Maybe you like the contract type of thing where you approach an organization that already has coaching embedded, and you want to, as a subcontractor or as an employee, you want to support them. But these are decisions you have to make. And there's another aspect of coaching as well, is that especially if you're doing it part-time, you don't want to dedicate all this time into marketing and doing all the other stuff. You just want to coach. You could do that. But the other side of it is you could also be a coach that wants to go into an organization, just like you are part of a corporate culture or whatever. You want to use your coaching skills within that. Mm-hmm. Like these are categories we need to think about, like what kind of coach do I want to be? Because that will determine where your efforts go. Yeah. I wasn't clear on that. I didn't know where my efforts should have been. But had I known from the beginning, hey, I just want to get some experience in coaching and learn this, I would have fully dedicated my time to trying to reach out to other organizations who are already doing coaching and they're open to doing this, versus me trying to figure out how to build a whole business. Very different approach. What do you think about that, Dr. Sherry?
Well, I think that's a really, really good point. Jumping out of, I know that there's a lot of coaches, even a lot of coaches in our in our mastery community who just jumped ship out of corporate into the coaching world. And so the reality is they have two huge learning curves. One is in coaching, and two is in actually owning and running a business. So they've got two really hard, challenging things they're trying to learn at the same time. Not that it's not doable, but just recognize the extra challenge trying to do both things at the same time. And so being able to plug into an organization that will offer you the opportunities to learn coaching and get mastery in that might be a great opportunity. I know that I get hit up, I get kind of automated messages all the time in LinkedIn, saying, and it says my internet is unstable.
Yeah,
so
it looks like it's a
can
bit
see this.
unstable. I can hear it clearly. It's
But,
just your pictures moving slowly.
Okay,
Now it's good.
perfect. So so I get messages all the time from through LinkedIn like, hey, so and so, this organization is looking for an executive coach, or all these different things, and I look at that, I'm like, wow, that's a great opportunity for somebody. It doesn't tickle my fancy, but it is a great opportunity for somebody that is looking for that. So there are definitely opportunities out there. Just ask around, seek, and seek and you shall find, right?
Yeah, and definitely. And then if I were to go back, and that's exactly what I did there was a point where, like, when it hit me that more than anything, I want coaching experience, and I will build a business, do anything else. I was like, okay, how can I connect with people who have already built it, and I can move forward in that area. And a lot of my efforts and it wasn't that much of an effort. It was just, I became hyper conscious of that, and I was looking at within the groups that I was in, who's looking for that stuff, and I would jump on those kind of opportunities. And that was and when I've worked with my clients who are coaches, I'm like, well, where are your efforts going? And you will see, like, the efforts are scattered because the internal decision hasn't been made, like, what do you want to do? But as soon as you make the decision, then you're clear as to where. And there's a distinction, I think. Which book was it? It was in a business book that I read, where it said that, think of the difference between a flashlight and a laser light. When our efforts are scattered and you put a flashlight on the wall, it's like it creates a bright thing. But if you take a laser light that's powerful enough and it's directing a beam, it has the potential to go through the wall. That's how you want your efforts to be, is to be directed towards what you want. And that and as coaches, we understand that clarity is important in terms of behavior and action. We're not going to take consistent action or focused action if we don't have that clarity. So it's important for us to think about how are we approaching our business. Now, a lot of times you might fall and figure this out the hard way, but these are distinctions that would have helped me a lot had I thought about this early on, or Dr. Sherry. So maybe we can now, if you've made these kind of decisions around your identity, around some of the mindset stuff that you need to take care of, what would be your value ladder? Which way are you going towards this? Assuming that you want the entrepreneurial side, what would that look like? How would you approach it? You want to start that off, Dr. Sherry?
Absolutely. So first, I'll define what a value ladder actually is. So I am solidly plugged into the internet marketing world of ClickFunnels and Russell Brunson. So I've been kind of in that world for probably about 4 to 5 years now. And so a lot of my knowledge and a lot of my implementation comes from them. So if you're interested in getting more information, I mean, that's where most of my frame of reference comes from. But the value ladder, simply put, is this idea, if you can think about a ladder or like a stair step, it's simply that you have got services or things of value that you can offer potential clients, but they are of differing value, both in price and both in kind of what they offer, the value that they offer the client. And so the idea in the marketing world is intentionally creating this ladder, and so that a client, if they don't have a lot of money, or more importantly, if they don't know you that well, they haven't, built you don't have the like, trust, and know factor with them yet, that it gives them an opportunity to start to know you so they can get to like you, so they can get to want, what you have to offer, by having something that's doesn't cost them much, or they're not put out a whole lot if they, there's not a lot of risk there, I guess is one way of putting it. So the idea is the more kind of stair steps you have, the more that you can kind of attract and serve people. Now, the one thing I just kind of want to point out is that when you're starting out in a business, your value ladder may be like two rungs or two little steps, and that's totally fine. I kind of fell into this trap of like, value ladder. Oh my gosh. Let me have 29 things all scaled out, and it's like, it's overwhelming to do that much. So really all you need is, I think two things is probably like the minimum value ladder. And what that might be is simply your service, your main service, if that's going to be individual coaching, if that's going to be a mastermind, a membership, or whatever, like that's your main thing. But then what are you going to do to get people into that? What kind of value are you going to offer through the sales process? And it might be a free strategy call or something like that. So that could be like the entry point, or maybe it's a little, it's an ebook that you wrote, or a video, or a little course, or a live session of some sort. I mean, there's something that you want to offer them, or allows them to get exposed to you and what you have to offer, and your knowledge and your expertise, to then funnel them into the bigger thing that you are offering, the individual coaching, or the masterclass, or the mastermind, or whatever that is. So I would propose that your value ladder, just start out by two things, the main thing, and then whatever it is you're going to attract people into that.
Yeah.
Faisal, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I love how you described it, and a couple of points of clarification that I mean, it in terms of marketing, what I've learned is that people need to be exposed to you multiple times. That like, know, and trust factor, it's more about them trusting you than your process. It's we focus on, for example, like a lot of certified high performance coaches, they bring a lot of credibility because they've been certified in that process, and they will go out there and talk about that a lot. But then the problem is that the people that they're presenting to, do they like, know, and trust them? And much of marketing is actually building that. And I realized that not because I started learning it, I was trying to learn it, but that wasn't very effective for me. But it actually, from within the experience, I realized that looking back, and this was like around 3-4 years into my coaching. And there was a point where I wasn't, and it was like, it wasn't like a clear line where I stopped kind of reaching out to people, and I started getting requests. But at some point I had transitioned towards taking more requests than I was reaching out to people. And there was a point like I wasn't reaching out to anybody for months. And in fact, I was getting to a point where like, I don't think I can take more people. And that challenged me to create something else. And I started thinking, and the first thing that popped into my head, which is likely what pops into a lot of people's head, or maybe I'm the one with that problem, is that, hey, I must be really good. Which might be true to an extent, but that wasn't the whole picture. The bigger picture was that I had just spent the past 2 years doing, just because I love doing it, I did strategy sessions and coaching for so many people. A lot of it, I did it for free. A lot of it, I'm not recommending that, but what I'm saying is that I was in groups, I was in one-on-one conversations day after day after day. And there was a point that switched, and I didn't even notice it. And then I started noticing, holy shit, people are reaching out to me, people are sending referrals, people are talking about me. And then that shifted. And the only thing that came back to me is, as I started learning more about marketing, is that I was more in front of people. I was vulnerably sharing. I was talking about my journey. I was sharing my challenges. I was sharing my win. I was giving perspective. They were getting exposed to the material that I was teaching. And slowly that created this kind of compound effect. And to a point where I didn't even realize I was getting more outreach towards me versus me trying to find clients to work with. And this is really, so asking yourself as a coach, first of all, where are you hanging out on a consistent basis? Because it's very easy as a coach, especially if you don't have a community, which I recommend, which we both recommend, that you need to have a community to be around. But let's say if you carry the normal part of a coach, especially if you're certified, or even if you're not, you're going to go get your certification, get all excited, and guess what you're going to do? You're going to go home and sit in your corner trying to figure this out. And you're going to put out some videos and some posts and hope for somebody to engage with you. It doesn't work. You need, like, the whole business operates with, you need to be around other people. It doesn't matter what that looks like. It could be you going there and giving speaking engagements, like going to your local place and doing some speaking engagements. It could be you doing webinar. It could be you being involved in groups. Like, for example, one of the things that I've done that's been more effective than my webinars is just being part of a book club, like literally. So, and I love doing that because when I noticed the books that they were reading, it's like, I love these books. And a lot of them I had read them, some of them I hadn't, but then I started getting involved. And within those book clubs, there were conversations that came up around the thing that I like, the thing that I help people with. And the more
was that by chance, Faisal? Were you socially engineering those conversations?
Well, initially it was by chance. Then after a while, I started noticing that, holy shoot, this is actually so I was in that book club, and I was also running my my quote unquote webinar, but it was more like this kind of setting with a bunch of people every month. I was having more success just being part of the webinar with much less effort, so being part of the book club with much less effort versus preparing and doing all this stuff. So then I'm like, I love this. Doesn't take much effort. I just have to sit there and read the book and listen and talk about it. And people were reaching out to me. And they were kind of like, hey, I loved some of the perspectives that you shared. Would you like to connect? Like, there was no marketing in that sense, in the normal sense that we think of. And then I was like, holy shoot, this is incredible.
Yeah. So let me put a pin in that for a minute, because I have never heard anyone say, if you join a book club, that will be your ticket to clients.
No, I didn't either.
Right? So I think that just highlights how there is not a single correct path in this. It is find the things that you love and talk about what you love, try things, be around other people, as you said, find your communities, whatever that is, communities you've created, communities that you want to be a part of, and just be you, provide value, share your wisdom, and you're going to start to find like, ooh, yeah, this is pretty cool. You're going to find some stuff happening in an area that you may never have expected. It's kind of an experiment, right? Trial and error.
Yeah.
And yet I think that we beat ourselves up for experimenting. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if you find yourself, like I do, beating myself up when my experiment didn't work, just like my challenge that I was supposed to be doing this week didn't end up happening, so I'm rescheduling it in a couple weeks to give some more effort. If I had used the same mindset that I had around my challenge, if Thomas Edison had used that mindset, where would we be in this world if he had given up all of those experiments that he did that have moved technology forward so much? And how can we harness his mindset of perseverance and, the idea that, well, now I know that what doesn't work, so let me just continue to find what will work. Like, how would that change our lives?
Yeah, and then there's one thing that keeps popping up for me, what you said, which I love, is that find the things that you're attracted to, that you love. Like for me, I have this, even when I'm reading something I'm naturally thinking, and I thought even before I was a coach, I used to like, why do I do this? I'll read something, I'm thinking about how could I teach that? And later on, I realized that's actually a strategy to learn better. And I would retain a lot more information, but there was this interest that I had in teaching and connecting with people, and especially, and I didn't realize this because I considered myself an extreme introvert initially. I didn't realize how much, and that was because I got a lot of pain from environment, social environments, but I wasn't that. I don't think I'm like I'm all over the place, but I'm finding more and more that when I'm around the right people, I want to be very expressive. I want to connect. I want to listen. I want to interact. So a couple of things that I learned, and this component coaches might not think about it. I think Jim Quick in his book Limitless, which I was exposed to this a while ago, and us talked about this. I'd heard it multiple times, and I thought when I started getting exposed to it, I thought about it. Well, where is your genius zone? Like even the concept of genius, and that, oh, you need to be a certain way to, for example, most of genius that we attribute to people, it's around IQ, it's around their academic accomplishments and that stuff. But then genius has different aspects to it. And for me, I realized it was in a completely different area. Academically, I was gifted, but I didn't care about that much. What I cared about, that I wanted to kind of explore more, was my emotional intelligence more and my bigger perspective. Like those two things gave me huge leverage. And every time I would go in a group, most of the people didn't have the bigger perspective that I was able to see. Most of the people didn't connect the way I was able to connect.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that you can't do those things, but you're going to have your genius zone, the things that you want to grow in, the things that you want to connect with, the things that you love. And you're likely, your genius zone is the things that you're interested in.
Yeah. And ironically, we tend to be interested in the things that we're good at.
Yeah.
There is a correlation there. So if you want to be interested in something, maybe get better, learn more about it. And the more you learn about it, it's going to feed into your interest. My husband used to make fun of me all the time because I didn't like playing basketball. And I would tell him, I'm like, because I suck at basketball. I played a year in like 7th grade and that's it. And so if I was good at it, I probably would like playing it, but I'm not, therefore I don't. And so I think that's just human nature, a lot of times. And so if you want to be passionate about something, put time and energy into getting good at it.
Yeah, but there is another component to that too. So it can also be tricky in the sense that I never would have thought 7 years ago or so that I had a huge amount of emotional intelligence that I wasn't utilizing. And that was mostly what I shared, was in terms of how I felt within my social situations, because most of the time I looked at emotions in a negative way, and I looked at it as a weakness. But it wasn't until I started looking into it, and it was very painful for me to look into it. But as soon as I went towards it, I started noticing, holy shoot, it was opening up other avenues for me.
Yeah.
So it's possible that the thing that might be your genius zone, the thing that will help you leverage that to a different level, and it goes back to your limiting beliefs, might be something you're not even aware of in this moment. Yeah. And all this comes down to a couple of things. One, do you have a coach? Do you have a community? Because if you're stuck in your own head, you don't know anything outside of that. There's nobody giving you feedback.
Yeah.
Of like what is working for you, what is not working for you, kind of pointing the things that they observe that you might not notice yourself, can be incredibly powerful in my shit. And most of the shift that I've had internally has been being around the right people, even if that's my relationship with my wife. Like she's pointed out a few things that I never noticed on my own. But then I needed the community to help me keep working on that. I needed the coaching to help me keep working on that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone towards that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the value of the coaching mastery community, is that a foundational piece of it is that everybody that's in the community is coaching somebody else in the community. and they're also getting coaching from somebody in the community. And it's interesting because every so often we're switching. So we have an opportunity to coach somebody different, somebody a different personality, so that we can, continue to refine our skills in diversity. But we're also getting coaching from a different coach. So, sometimes I've had a high performance coaching. I've also had parenting coaching, which is super fascinating. Um, and everything in between. And so there is a sense that the more that we I think two things. One is there's personal development that happens because we are continuing to be challenged, but there's also professional development in that too. I've had when I'm being coached by a coach, I've been asked questions and I'm like, ooh, that's really good. Like, I want to remember that and use that. I've also like with this one gal that I'm coaching right now. She has been an online coach for, I want to say, 15 years, so far longer than I've been in the coaching world. And so when almost every session I've had with her, there is one question I can muster up on all the rest of them, and she's like, "Wow, it's like a showstopper for her, like that really impacts her and really gets her to shift." And had I not had that experience of being able to ask a powerful question to somebody that's far more seasoned than me, I wouldn't have the confidence, as much confidence in like that I can coach somebody that is quote unquote, further along or more advanced or better or whatever. And so there's such power in being able to professionally work on our craft with other people that are doing the same things or similar things to us. Huge amount of professional and personal growth.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is interesting, like even the nature of our conversation is that much of what we're talking about when it comes to value ladder is not really like the value ladder stuff is not complicated. Right. It's the foundational stuff that you need to set behind it, such as your identity, such as your mindset, such as who you're connected to. Like the things that we're going to actually recommend, we're going to challenge our clients to create in their life, because these are human themes. And once we set those up, then the value ladders are very simple. At some point, initially, when like Dr. Sherry said, you're going to start out, you're going to probably have your one-on-one coaching. And maybe you're going to, if you feel confident or if you have some experience, you're going to do group coaching. And those will be your value ladder. And then before that, you're doing some strategy session to get people into to the program. But as you grow and expand, that value ladder keeps expanding with you. And the process of that growth requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of persistence. It requires working through your fears. It requires challenging yourself to go to the next level. It requires not giving up. What the hell are we trying to do with our clients?
Certainly none of those things.
And this is the part that like it's such a subtle thing. A coach will jump in and they will expect for all this because they had done some work in the past. But no, this is a very different context. Right now, you're meant to be challenging yourself. That doesn't mean you're awfully successful in business. That means you are actually putting that effort in it, and that you will grow with your clients. Yeah. You will grow with the people that you're going to serve.
Yeah. And just kind of wanted to highlight the vulnerability in your own personal growth. I think it's easy. I've certainly thought this at times. It's easy to be like, well, I'm the coach, and so I need to let people know that I can coach them perfectly, that I'm really competent. If I say or do anything that makes me look dumb or, uninformed or whatever, like these are the thoughts in my brain, then I have just screwed my reputation, and that I cannot recover from. Like, yeah. If I want to take some of my fears to the extreme, that's kind of what happens in my brain. And I was reminded of actually 2 days ago. So I have a coach who is a personal trainer and nutrition coach. And so she sent me a video yesterday, I think it was, and it was a 20-minute video, and it was all about her struggles with nutrition and her self-perception. And, here's this beautiful girl, super fit. She does, body competitions, and she's saying how her hormones are screwed up. She's mentally unstable just because of the hormones, and so she kind of feels unstable. She can't go to the gym because she can't physically get herself out of bed in the morning, and all of these things. And she was being very vulnerable, very real. And after that, I watched that video. I'm like, whew, I'm not alone. Like, I didn't lose respect for her. I actually gained an incredible amount of respect that, here she is trudging through daily life just like the rest of us, with all of these things impacting, some of them out of her control, and yet she has to deal with the mess left behind. And so that was a really strong reminder to me that our clients don't need to see us be perfect. They need to see us be human. And I think that's a mindset that, we can be and let ourselves be seen in certain ways that actually is beneficial to our clients. I'm not, if any of you guys are familiar with Brene Brown, she is kind of like the foremost expert on vulnerability.
I love Brene Brown.
Yes, she's been researching it probably for about 20 years now. And I love in one of her books, she gets into the weeds on what is vulnerability. And sometimes people they think about vulnerability and immediately they think about, oh, that video or that post that so and so did where they just spilled the beans on all the crap that's going on in their life. That is not necessarily vulnerability. She calls that shock and awe. Or something to that effect. So it's not about you getting on a video and being like, guess what happened this morning? My husband and I got in an argument and my kid said this. And, it's not you like dropping your gossip and your garbage everywhere just because. But I think it's very, I would propose it's a very intentional display of this is what life can be. This is what I'm experiencing as a human. And then I think the value of this is how I'm trying to respond to that. So it's like you're teaching, you're showing people what's possible by what you are doing in your life. So it's kind of showing people, not just telling them. So I think something extremely, extremely powerful in that.
Yeah, I love that, and I don't, and I actually learned that from Brene Brown too. The vulnerability piece is that I haven't found more of a powerful tool to connect with my clients than vulnerability. There are other ways to do this, but nothing comes close to you vulnerably sharing whatever you're going through. Versus, and you actually, it also interestingly explains the difference between consultant and coach. Because if you think about it, most of our life, the people that we're exposed to who are quote unquote experts, from doctors to teachers to whoever we come across, they are these experts that know. That is not what the coaching world is. Mm-hmm. That if we carry that mindset into the coaching world, most of your sessions will become, here's what you should do.
Right.
Or here are some options for you, versus getting and here that the difference that I see, like visually as I'm talking about this, for me pictures are very powerful, is that an expert will be sitting on top of a tower or a ledge telling people what to do. A coach is more like, hey, let me hold your hand and walk through this dark forest with you. Mm-hmm. And there will be a point where you're gonna hit a edge of a cliff and neither of you are gonna see what's ahead, and that requires you to be just as honest about your fears, about your challenges, and so they can not only feel, just like you said, that they're not the only ones, for one thing, and two, they see another human being walking with them. Yeah. that will support them. And one of the most common things, especially in my group sessions, that every client will say is like, when I ask them for their insights, is like, I'm not alone. It's like the most empowering perspective you get is that, no, you're not the only one. This is a human thing. Most people deal with these things. Doesn't matter if you're a coach or not, you're going to deal with them. And people need to understand that you are taking that human journey. You haven't just learned things, so that I call that the professor complex, where you have theoretically learned things, but you haven't actually applied them in your life.
Yes.
So I think that's incredibly powerful, and when you bring that vulnerability, clients naturally get attracted to you, especially the ones that feel aligned with that. They see aspects of your struggle, and they don't have to go through the same things. I've shared my story that nobody has gone through it that I've connected with, but they see elements of my struggles in their own life.
Yeah.
And based on that, they connect with me. And even the testimonials that I have, my clients say, well, one of the things that they remember more is like, oh, he's a human being just like me. Like, he's not sitting there trying to tell me what to do.
It reminds me of just like Pinocchio, like, I am a real boy, you know?
Yeah.
So as we wind down this podcast, Faisal, what if you were to kind of distill of all the things we talked about and the themes, what would be like the one takeaway that you would love for a coach to get?
I think the biggest takeaways, and this will be the distinction, and a lot of people will be thinking, because we talked a lot about hard work, but we didn't talk about smart work. But in my mind, the hard work is the smart work. Is the intelligent, because if and that goes back to the decisions you need to make, the internal work that you need to do, because when you do make those decisions, you become clear about how you want to approach your business, how you want to approach your coaching practice, what kind of identity you want to adapt, whether you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to approach this from a different perspective, and you decide internally how you want to show up for your clients, for yourself, what you're modeling, what, like, when you work on this, and this is hard work, like all this is very hard work, then the things that you're going to do will be very smart in the world, because you've thought about a lot of the things in the background. Your actions will be much more productive versus, hey, let me just do a bunch of stuff that might or might not take me to a direction. So the hard work, and it's interesting paradox, will be the smart work for you. It's that you've thought about your vision, you've thought about your values, and that's why it comes down to you getting the support you need to get to the next level. It's not about you just serving people at whatever. It's about you consistently growing too as a coach.
Perfect.
What about you, Dr. Sher?
Well, thanks for asking, Faisal. I would
No
say
problem.
that the journey of coaching is not well defined.
Yeah.
And if you come, regardless of how you have found yourself as a coach, give yourself the freedom and the permission to try things often, to experiment, to take on some different clients you might not normally do, or to try some different strategies. Have fun with it. This isn't this isn't a life or death thing. You have a lot of things to offer, and who knows what it's going to ultimately be like. That's where you're going to land. That's going to be the most powerful. Uh, so take every step with a grain of salt, and have fun with it and experiment and give yourself permission to do that. Because I know I could never have predicted where I am today, 10 years ago. And I'm quite confident that even next year, even as much as I plan and I have goals and all these sorts of things, I'm going to be somewhere that I still couldn't have predicted. And I'm okay with that. I kind of love to see what kind of the cool things that unfold in life. So that would be my takeaway. Give yourself some grace and permission.
Yeah, I love that. And there's something you pointed out that's really powerful in there, for me at least, when I look at it, is that the coaching world is not predefined. It's like there is no actual industry right now. And what excites me about that is that we're the pioneers.
Yes.
The people that are going to move it forward right now are going to be the pioneers. They're going to set the stage. Think like Freud, stage for psychologists that we all go back to. And for me, that's so incredible, because we're part of something that's much bigger than us. We don't even know how this is going to serve humanity in the future.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that we are in. Yep, we're in the middle of some major shifts globally, quite honestly.
Yeah.
and it's entirely unpredictable. But as an entrepreneur, we take full ownership of our lives and our contributions in the world, even though we can't always, the illusion of control, right? Like we can't really control everything else. But what we can control is our thoughts that then influence our behaviors and how we're able to impact people around us.
Yeah. So I think that is it for this episode. And make sure if you know a coach, which I know there will be multiple coaches. Struggling with many of the concepts we talked about, share this post with them because it's going to serve them. I wish I had this perspective just 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. Yep. Share, like, subscribe, and however you're consuming this, we appreciate it. Send us a message, comment, DM, whatever. We would love to hear from you. If there's a particular topic that you would love to see us talk about, or to bring experts, other coaches, other people on the journey to, you would love to hear their perspective, or if you have a perspective that you would love to share, a journey that you would love to share, let us know. We would love to have you on.
Yes. Hope you have an incredible week. Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey Podcast.